Welcome, one and all. This is the Ancient Journey. On today's journey, the Dead Outlaw. But before we get started, don't forget, if you enjoy our content, hit that like button, share the video, and subscribe. Now let's get started. They say everyone has their 15 minutes of fame, and for most of us, that 15 minutes is spread out over a lifetime. But in one peculiar case, an outlaw from the Wild West enjoyed his 15 minutes of fame over and over and over again. Elmer J. McCurdy was known as the bandit who wouldn't give up. The outlaw was born in Maine in 1880, growing up unruly and rebellious while being raised by his uncle. Elmer turned to the bottle at a young age and drifted through job after job, losing most due to his alcoholism. He eventually joined the Army in 1907 and was honorably discharged in 1910. Now living in Kansas, McCurdy had been arrested for possession of burglary tools. He was found innocent of the charges, but then began his career as a bank and train robber. But McCurdy's crimes generally turned into comedies. McCurdy and a few friends decided to rob an Iron Mountain Pacific train after hearing about a safe on board that was flush with cash. McCurdy, using his knowledge of explosives gained from the Army, attempted to blow open the door using nitroglycerin. He used too much, and he blew the safe and the money inside to bits. In another failed attempt, McCurdy and two other friends decided to rob a Kansas bank. This time, McCurdy put his bomb around the door of the bank vault. The explosion was a little too much once again, and it blew the vault door all the way into the bank. McCurdy then decided to turn his attention to the safe inside the vault, placing a detonator charge onto that. But this time, the charge failed to ignite at all. The men got spooked, ran off from the bank, only able to grab a few coins on their way out the door. But McCurdy was still looking to hit it big. In 1911, McCurdy and two more accomplices planned to rob a train on the Kansas-Texas system that was rumored to contain some $400,000 in cash. But McCurdy and his pals stopped the wrong train, commandeering a passenger train by mistake. The group was only able to steal $46 from the mail clerk on board, 2 containers of whiskey, a revolver, and a watch. A newspaper deemed the robbery one of the smallest in the history of train robberies. McCurdy slunk home and spent the night guzzling his stolen whiskey, and by morning, a group of sheriffs were there to meet him. At around 7 a.m., the 3 sheriffs and McCurdy get into a gunfight, and McCurdy is just as successful at that as he is at being an outlaw. McCurdy is shot and killed. McCurdy's 15 minutes of fame might seem like they've ended, but there's much more to this story. After being killed, McCurdy's body remains unclaimed at the local undertakers. To assist in preserving the body until it was claimed, the undertaker embalms McCurdy with an arsenic-based preservative, the type of embalming meant to preserve a body for a very long time while next of kin can be tracked down. But poor Elmer has no next of kin who claim him. And now he has another problem on top of being dead. The undertaker has taken great pains to shave him and dress him in a suit, even to store him in the rear of the funeral home, and the undertaker wants to get paid for his time. So the undertaker decides he can make some money back by dressing up Elmer's corpse as an exhibit. Elmer's next 15 minutes of fame have begun. Dressed up in street clothes and holding a rifle, Elmer's body was on display for just a nickel per viewing. And then in 1916, someone claiming to be Elmer's long-lost brother contacts the undertaker and makes arrangements for McCurdy to be shipped to him in San Francisco for a proper burial. The next day, the man actually arrives at the funeral home in person, and Elmer is released to him. But McCurdy is not put on a train to San Francisco. Instead, he's transported to Arkansas City, Kansas, and his new home in the Traveling Carnival, owned by James and Charles Patterson. The Pattersons had come up with the scheme to claim Elmer's body, and now they had him on display as the outlaw who would never be captured alive. In 1922, the Pattersons sell their carnival to a man named Louis Sonny, who uses Elmer's corpse as part of a wax museum display of famous criminals. Elmer was loaned out to a director to help promote a film in 1943. And by this time, Elmer had begun to mummify, his skin becoming hard and shriveled. In 1949, Elmer is placed into storage, but don't worry, he still has more minutes of fame left. Elmer is lent out in 1964 to another filmmaker to promote a 1967 film called She Freak. In 1968, Elmer sold with a bunch of wax figures to the Hollywood Wax Museum. The Wax Museum actually returns Elmer. He's not to be deemed lifelike enough for their display. So Elmer is then resold to a place called the Pike, an amusement park in California. And by 1976, Elmer's body is hanging in the Dark Funhouse exhibit at the Pike. Being so close to Hollywood, the Pike becomes the setting for an episode of the popular TV show The $6 Million Man. During the filming, a prop man tries to move Elmer from his perch, and Elmer's arm falls off, revealing bone and muscle tissue underneath. Police are called, and Elmer's mummified body is taken for an autopsy. He's changed hands so many times that there's no good record of who he is. The autopsy reveals his cause of death and also reveals he was suffering from tuberculosis. The bullet probably did Elmer a favor. Inside Elmer's mouth is a 1924 penny and a ticket stub to a sideshow and museum of crime. The body was confirmed to be Elmer McCurdy. By now, Elmer's story has been featured in newspapers and television. He was getting every second of another 15 minutes of fame. Several funeral homes offered to bury Elmer free of charge, but officials waited to see if any next of kin would claim him. Eventually, McCurdy is allowed to be buried at the Boot Hill section of the Summit View Cemetery in Oklahoma. A few hundred people show up to the cemetery. 2 feet of concrete are poured over Elmer's body to make sure it can't be stolen again. The bumbling Elmer McCurdy now lies in a famous outlaw cemetery, next to several other notorious figures of the Wild West. So the failed outlaw is now buried in his final resting place. Elmer's 15 minutes of fame still aren't up, though. They're writing a musical about his life set to debut in 2022. Elmer doesn't appear to be going anywhere just yet. Thanks for watching, and thanks for sharing the journey.